All right, folks, we'll go through SARs, suspicious activity reporting. This is just, for some folks, maybe a review. Maybe some of you guys don't do this. If you're doing this for houses of worship, I'm sure most of you are. So we'll go through it pretty quickly, and then Scott's going to show you how you kind of transfer this information in the platform, how you use it. And if you have any questions, again, you can ask Scott. Let me put everybody on mute here. It's not. Okay. All right. All right, we'll get started. Okay, if you guys want to get a hold of me, you can there. Contact at michaelmannsecurityservices.com, or you can email Scott at michaelmannsecurityservices.com. You can give me a call anytime. All right, just real quick, we'll talk about considerations for this. I'll define suspicious activity for you, and then I'll kind of add. We do a lot of behavior detection stuff for houses of worship and for businesses. You guys know I worked in Israel about 2 years and studied there, and so that's where I picked up most of or some of that stuff. So we'll talk about suspicious activity based on maybe it's a little bit different definition with some other, or kind of the way we look at it. So I'll give a basic definition, then I'll talk about how you figure that out based on what you guys are doing every week. We'll talk about the adversary attack planning cycle, or what I call the attack methodology. We'll talk about just some basic indicators. This is not a DHS, because I don't buy into most of this stuff video, but I'll talk about just some basic stuff where you guys can pick up some indicators of this. We're going to talk about SAR essentials, and then again, Scott's going to go over the incident management platform. So I got to jump off and do this CPP thing for some folks. All right, any questions from anybody before we get started? All right, just some basic stuff about SARs that's kind of get your mindset right here. Just remember that you guys hear this on the media, but there's no such thing as a random attack. And the purpose of talking about that here is because everything that they do, or very specific parts of the adversary attack planning methodology, is detectable. And that's what an SAR is for, really. If we pay attention and we do some things, there's a possibility we can prevent this just by identifying something, reporting it, and then hopefully use deterrence as our main method to stop something bad from happening. Our job as protectors, I'm a military law enforcement guy, but I've been in the physical protection world for over 20 years designing programs. So our job is to prevent something. It's not to respond. You respond, a couple things happen. Number one, if you don't have a response mechanism at your facility, then you're going to have to depend on somebody that's somebody coming from some other location, and they're not really trained in response anyway, so that's a bad thing. Two, if you have to respond, you might get hurt, you might get killed. Three, it may not be effective. And then, of course, four, there's some legal ramifications behind it, both from the criminal and civil side, whether you're in the right or not, it doesn't matter. When we talk about prevention, we want to conduct that psychological stop versus that physical stop. That psychological stop comes from deterrence, our ability to psychologically impact the motivation of that adversary. The physical stop, again, it puts us at physical harm. It puts our primary asset, which is people, at harm also. So it puts them in harm's way. And again, there's some legal ramifications behind us trying to use those methods to conduct that physical stop. So the SAR, believe it or not, if we're doing our job, helps us with that psychological stop. And then the deterrence piece in this, where we kind of come full circle, is obviously SARs are designed to help us, number one, identify what we believe to be suspicious activity. It helps us analyze the information. And then if you have a network, which Scott will talk about at the end of this, then you're able to distribute that information to your network and all your stakeholders. And that way that information can get out and be used and disseminated and maybe stop something. Okay? One second, make sure we're on mute. And we are. All right? So deterrence really equals, especially when we talk about the SARs, it can help us identify, analyze, and distribute this information. Okay? One big thing, especially we talk about houses of worship, there is no standard, which sometimes is good, but most of the times it's bad for us. And so because of that, this kind of helps us put a standard in place and disseminate things that, again, might deter or prevent something from occurring. When we talk about SARs, we're talking about trying to capture this suspicious activity. We're talking about trying to identify it, put that document into the report, and then disseminate this out to the people or distribute it out to people that need to see it. And that could be any behavior that's indicative of criminal activity, intelligence gathering, which is what hostile surveillance is all about. Any of the kind of activity that is pre-operational. So something that occurs before the actual attack, or what some of us call attack execution. So that's a really basic definition for suspicious activity. Can anybody tell me what the problem with this is? So there's a definition here, but especially when we talk about lack of standards, or maybe some of this is done with volunteers, or most of it, right? And maybe there's not a lot of training. What is the big issue with this definition, or even trying to identify it? Anybody know? Take a guess. Yeah, I can put this definition up here, but what does it look like? What does it mean? What is suspicious? What's criminal activity? What can intelligence gathering look like? And how do we pick this out if we have volunteers? Have very little training. We don't have a lot of resources. Maybe they don't want to come to training. I mean, I'm in Atlanta right now. I'm doing a security assessment. So I'm here for the next 2 days for a large ministry that's connected to a church. And they do have they've got some standards here. I was looking at that tonight. They got sent to me. So I was doing the first walkthrough for the survey today. But it's unusual, right? So a lot of times, because there's not standards and we put volunteers out, they really don't even know what this means or what they're looking for. So when we talk about SARs and suspicious activity reports, what we're talking about is this information that goes outside of our pattern analysis. So this assessment method that we should do prior to sticking folks out there, so they understand what it is they're looking for and what they're trying to put in for the report, right, or into the report, that information. So that pattern analysis is that thing that we do to help us recognize and find regularity within what we're trying to protect, right? So it's what we expect versus assumptions. A lot of assumptions in this part of the physical security world, because again, the standards are not set up. Sometimes there just aren't any. Most of the time we talk about standards in this environment, it has to do with carrying a gun, and in most states that means folks just have to have a carry permit, right? So the pattern analysis helps us. This method you guys, or all of us, should be doing to determine really what it is that we're looking for, right? And so what are our expectations? And if we see something that are outside those expectations, that could be considered suspicious maybe, or something that we need to document anyway, okay? So when we look at, so kind of what we're looking at here outside of this criminal activity, if we're really trying to prevent an attack, we talk about the adversary attack methodology, or these actions that, that this adversary must follow to ensure this successful attack. Now, if you guys have done any study on this, and it's all the same, right? Whether we call it a pathway, whether we call it a cycle, pretty much all the same. We just have different terms based on what level of what part of the pathway, or what part of the path or attack methodology that they're in. So we start off with everything from a grievance, why they're going to attack, which we won't know. We don't know what that looks like, from planning all the way down to attack execution. Unfortunately for us, what happens is we don't see this. Most of the time, the churches, houses of worship, and ministries don't see this during hostile surveillance. So what happens is they don't recognize it. So they might see some activity, but they don't exactly know what it is that they see. What happens is we tend to respond or see this during attack execution when the attack is occurring. So what information that we're trying to identify, gather, document, and disseminate is, we hope, is information or some action that we see that could be hostile surveillance, right? And there's two types. There's that on-site, which means what they're going to do when they show up. Of all the church attacks or houses of worship attacks the last 20 years, I've tried to dive into all of them as much as possible. And what information that we can find on all of them is the adversary they showed up 2 weeks before, 3 days before. The attack cycle seems to be very short for a house of worship here in the U.S. anyway. And they did conduct hostile surveillance, and sometimes it was observed, but the people that saw it, one, didn't know what it was. Number two, didn't document it. It wasn't talked about until after the attack. And so because it wasn't documented, of course, it wasn't disseminated. and nothing happened with the information the attack occurred. Okay, so again, what we're looking for, what we're trying to document is what could be some sort of surveillance or some sort of observation. Okay, we talked about this last week, you guys. I think I showed you the video, but we talked about the FRC attack, and I like to show this a lot because it is a ministry, number one. Number two, because we have a lot of information about this, because it was considered a terrorist attack, because it was in D.C., the suspect or the adversary was, of course, when he was caught, he was convicted and charged with multiple counts of terrorism. So you guys saw this last week. This guy went through the entire adversary attack methodology. It's a little bit out of order from what we study or what we look at, but he still went through the process, right? And so here you guys saw this last week. He puts the bag down, he pulls the pistol out. Leo, the guard here, second exportable vulnerability that the adversary was able to actually see and exploit. He got in twice, once during hostile surveillance, and of course he got in to conduct the attack using ruse. Here he does, the guard takes 2 or 3 rounds to the arm, but he is able to subdue the adversary. So I went over this last week, but again, we'll talk about it here on the case study, a little bit out of order, but CORKINS went through the process. He decided to conduct an attack. He did not know exactly what type of facility or attack he was going to conduct at first, but he did realize that after understanding that he didn't want to use explosives, that he did want to use a handgun. So he did go first and start the planning process by purchasing the weapon, number one, and number two, getting practice with the weapon. And that happened on the 7th of August. Then somewhere around the 12th is when he finally visited a website to start to identify the target. So kind of the method of attack came first, and then target selection came second in this case. But he still followed a process with no training whatsoever. And then, of course, what we want to pay attention to is on the 13th, so the day after he selected the target, is when he did go through the process of showing up, conducting on-site surveillance. Discovered an exploitable vulnerability, used that to his advantage, and actually got into the target area, and then was able to gather information, realized that there were 15 people working inside the target area, and determined how he was going to get back in and then how he's going to conduct the attack. The hostile surveillance was on camera. The guard, very specifically for several minutes, talked to the adversary, realized when the adversary left that something's right, but it was not documented, it was not disseminated. Okay? And so I don't know that would prevent the attack, 100% sure that would prevented it, but that information was there. It was not disseminated. It was not analyzed. And 2 days later, he came back and he conducted the attack. Luckily, the guard at the desk was able to stop him, but unfortunately, the guard was shot. Now, he didn't die. He did survive the attack and he was able to stop it, but it was stopped in attack execution. We weren't trying to prevent this thing before it happens. So when we talk about what information are we trying to tell them to put in these SARs? And I don't want to go through a list of something that you could get off some sort of a FEMA presentation, because that's not always correct. So what we talk about is the presence of irregularities, right? The things that are happening outside the norm. And so those things are going to be things like appearance, and not what just somebody looks like, but if we do engage with somebody while they were there or while they told us they were there, and does it make sense? 2 is location, and that doesn't necessarily mean just the location of the building itself, but have we seen this person in multiple locations around our protected space? We've seen them in the parking lot. Have we seen them in other locations throughout the property, especially if you guys have big property? Have we seen them inside the building before? What does that look like? The third piece is the platform that they use. Have we seen them in a vehicle? Have we seen them on foot? What does that look like? And of course, that goes along with frequency also. Have we seen these folks more than once or more than twice? And so these are all basic things that we should probably just give into our volunteers. And this is the type of information that we want to put in the SARs. One big problem I see with SARs is people put a lot of information. They see something, they put it in an SAR. A lot of times maybe it's something that should be put in there. And as we analyze the information before dissemination, we realize that it's probably not good information. And what we do is we end up dumping it. It's not that we wasted our time, because we need to look at everything that's put in. But a lot of times when we figured out it's probably not suspicious activity, a lot of times that's based on the volunteers, the folks that are doing the work. They just didn't know. They didn't have the knowledge. Okay. And so the basic essentials of the suspicious activity report for you guys, you've got to see this before we go back to the pattern analysis. And that's that basic assessment that we're doing to figure out what our irregularities are, what the things that we expect. And that should be done at every type of service that you're doing. So, if it's Christian church, especially, I'm at a big Baptist church today. And so I was having conversations, there's Sunday services in the morning, Sunday services in the afternoon, Sunday services at 6 p.m. At 6 p.m. at night when they come back. There's Wednesday services, both for adults and for children. And then there are special services throughout the week. Very specifically, this church, they have a homeschool cooperative. So we need to do a pattern analysis, especially if we have protective personnel on site, of every type of service or every time those critical assets are inside. So when that pattern analysis happens during that site security survey, part of the essentials means, all right, we understand what it is we're looking for. And because we understand what we're looking for, once we see it, once we understand it's outside those expectations, what happens is that's what we put in the report. Okay. So that essential number one is understanding what that pattern analysis is, and we're documenting those things that are outside the expectations. The documentation piece is easy. Most people right now, especially in houses of worship, are documenting the old school way, and there's nothing wrong with it. We send these out, when we do this type of training. So these most of the time are like fillable PDFs. They're sent out in emails, or they're sent out in Facebook groups. And so this is this is where somebody goes in, or sometimes it's just handwritten and they scan them and send them out. There's nothing wrong with it. That's just an older way to do it, right? So, are you documenting, hard copy stuff? Are you doing it through fillable PDFs, emailing it out, or are you doing it electronically? Electronically, now is becoming the more effective way to do it. We talked about field notes last week. So part of this documentation starts in the use of field notes from the folks that are out there in those layers that are picking the activity up. So we take those field notes, or that operator takes those field notes, and then they transform those field notes into that actual SAR, and then they disseminate that out or send that to a leader, depending on how you guys are doing it. Some churches or houses of worship, what I'll see is the person out doing the work, the person out in the field. They'll take the field notes, they come, they do the report, and they send that report to a manager or leader first. The leader takes a look at it, decides if that's something that needs to be disseminated out, or they analyze it first. Once it's analyzed, if they think that it is suspicious activity, then they determine who it goes to based on the stakeholders, and then, of course, based on the type of incident. Documentation as much as we can, and I know it's hard to get folks trained up, but, I tell, all security teams, one of the basic classes you should have in the very beginning, because you're going to be doing a lot of reports if you're doing your job, is like basics of report writing, like is what we covered last week. So those everything, the field notes have to be clear and concise, but that SAR does need to be clear and concise. And so the information needs to be, it needs to be easy to understand, and it needs to be correct. So when we talk about it being correct, it's facts, not what the person assumed, not what they think they saw, but the facts of what they observed and what's documented inside. Sorry, I'm in a Hampton Inn, and apparently somebody upstairs is having a good time. And then, of course, the analyzation piece is somebody is going to review the information. And sometimes the best way to do that is we disseminate this out to stakeholders that can help us analyze it. And so we've done this in the past. Number one, a team lead, or maybe somebody from the house of worship, the management piece, maybe the operations manager gets the information, and they help to analyze. We can give this to law enforcement, especially if we get registration, vehicle registration numbers, tag numbers. If we get information that we can give to law enforcement, sometimes they can't share everything with us, but they can help disseminate and help us to, or not disseminate, but analyze and help us determine if this is actually valid based on information that they gather on this potential suspect. All right. So they can't give us information on tag numbers. They can run them themselves and they can look at that information, but they can't give it to us. But maybe they can come back and they can, they can refute or validate what it is that we thought we saw. And then, of course, again, when we talk about partners, these are going to be our other stakeholders. These could be other churches, other synagogues that we're sharing this information with and disseminating this out to. And then, of course, in that analyzation piece, I've already talked about this. We're going to validate whether or not this is suspicious activity. I don't have a percentage of numbers, what it looks like from everybody of, if they're doing an SAR, how many SARs are actually valid and what they're disseminating, but there's going to be a percentage that, it's not valid. It's going to be something that we're probably going to throw away. Right? And then, of course, the distribution piece of the SAR is going to be, obviously, we identify those stakeholders. And Scott's going to talk about this with platforms, something that we need to be very careful of, especially of a house of worship. If we get a report, I don't care if it's an incident report or if it's an SAR, a big piece of the analyzation section of this is going to be, what do we need to share? In incident reports, if it's a domestic assault, we want to be careful about using names and personal information, especially if we think it's, PI. And so because of that, we need to be very, very careful. So, we need to have some sort of process or procedure in place to understand that there is a need to know on this information, and we need to be careful about who it goes to. And so whatever platform you're using, whether it's hard copies and emails, or whether you're going to be using some sort of method that we're trying to pass along, just be sure that you've got some sort of method of concealing information in those reports that you don't want seen or disseminated. Okay, so if it's part of a report that you want disseminated, whether you're blacking that out or whether you're putting out some sort of an abbreviated report based on that SAR, just be careful about what you send out, because again, there is a need to know process on it. And this is going out to our partners, of course. And if I'm disseminating information to my partners, this is protective intelligence. That's part of the definition of it. We talked about the most effective method today. I think the electronic process is best, especially if you're trying to share that with other churches or houses of worship. And then, of course, Scott's going to talk about the incident management platform.
Okay. So, we call it the protective intelligence system or incident management system. There's no special, you can name it whatever you want, but this is something that you could use at your church, at your business, at your even at your home if you wanted to. There's a bunch of different ways you can do this. So at the end of the day, when you log in, I'm an admin in this desktop version of this. So there's a couple things that I can't do and a couple things I can do. The cans outweigh the can'ts. So I'm using the desktop version. I'll do another version of the mobile app. So this is what corporate security. I think y'all know Michael and I both work in corporate security. This would be equivalent to what somebody in corporate security uses at a large company or a small company, doesn't matter. But it has all the bells and whistles that a full-blown security, system or a large security company would use. So. When you log in, if I wasn't in the admin screen, it would take you to a map of your location, right? So that would pop up, and you've got your clients. So that would be the churches. In this case, one of the main benefits, because some of you'd be like, hey, I could just go out and get this on my own, right? Like we're not hiding who does this or whatever, that kind of stuff. And you could. The price is going to be like triple. Because we've helped negotiate down based on volume. And then number two, the main thing that this benefits you is that we've created our own network. So now if you use this system and you have churches down the street or businesses down the street, we're sharing information with each other. And that's the part that's key. So what we're hopeful of is that you'll see the value that brings. So when a black van, so if you get into these system settings and you start to look at like a person and a vehicle, and if you start going into these different categories here, and when you see a report here about, you'd go into an incident report right here, or whatever type of report you're reading through, you may see the black van that was XYZ 123 license plate showed up down the street a couple weeks ago, and that's one of the things that would stand out and make this a really nice feature for folks like us that we don't have access to the police reports or FBI or DHS or that kind of stuff. We can't share that information. In this system, you can. So give you an example, sites could be, this would be the different churches. So, you've got that option there. You've got regions. So you can see right here, right now, everything's generic as we build it out. But you might look at the Southeast region or the Northeast region, and we could even get really specific. Maybe there's 10 of you that want to be, and you're all in the different corners of different states. We could, build a region just for that group of churches, right? And then you've got branches, and that would be an example of, it's empty here now because this is the admin area, but you could have multiple buildings. So maybe you have a campus and you've got 8 different buildings. You can create a branch that would be each one of those buildings, and you can monitor it that way. You've got email groups. So like you can set it up that every time there's a building alert, right? I'm just making this stuff up. But if you click the right button in there, you would have the email would go out to all the other all the people on this list right here, Jane Smith, Mike Smith, and so on, right? So you've got all these bells and whistles. You can even schedule a report. So you get in here, and as an example, let me see if I can kind of show you what a new one. You could set it up to send building alerts to whoever the person is, and you'll see the one I've got already in here. It's going to go to these email addresses, Jane Smith and Mike Smith. It's going to go to them every morning at 9 a.m. It's going to send them the activity reports and the incident reports from the day before. So there's a lot of it's the same thing you would use in a corporate environment, right? You've got your different incident types. So vandalism, unsecured tenant space, trespassing, suspicious circumstance, activity types. Another one, this would be more for like a guard management. So if you're big enough and you have more than one person, or even if you just have one, you can use any device. So an iPhone, an Android device, and it can be used as a way for your guards or your volunteers to do tours. And you can take little QR codes and put them on a wall or on a post or a pole or outside or whatever. And if you said, hey, whoever's on, you got your concentric rings set up. So you've got an exterior post, you've got an interior post by the children's ministry, you've got an interior post by all the offices. And you could set it up so that the guards or the officers or the volunteers, whatever you call them, are scanning those little tags to show that they've been there, right? To kind of keep everybody, on task. But it also gives you the opportunity, you scan it, and then it's asking you a question like, is the door locked? Is everything okay? Whatever. And you could say, notice that the door was unlocked, or there's a leaky, there's something dripping from the ceiling, and whatever it is. So you almost get it to the point where you're using that to help build communications within the church. And this system has the ability to communicate with any of those. So you can set it up where if it's a maintenance type of thing, it would go to the maintenance people. If it's something that the pastor needs to know about, it goes to the pastor. If it's something that like everybody needs to know about, like this door was unlocked and we need to notify everybody, make sure that door's locked, it goes to everybody, that type of stuff. So you can really get, a lot of different features and bells and whistles and things like that. So at the end of the day, I don't know if you have, I don't want to waste all your time. It's 6:30. We've been on this for 30 minutes already. I don't see any questions in the chat. Any specific questions about this system? It's $100 a month. Like if you were to call this company and ask them, like, hey, I know, Michael Mann's doing this, but I just want to have my own. It's triple that. And then you only have your reports, right? So you can get software like this. It's going to cost a lot more, and you only have access to your information. So you may or may not, want to share all of your information, and that's a question that comes up a lot. So as an example, if you have a domestic situation with, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and you don't want anybody to know about it, there's a checkbox that you just check. It says private, and it hides that, so it wouldn't be searchable. So we can be sensitive to the fact that your church may not want to share all this with all your neighbors. You don't want them to know about a domestic dispute or somebody's going through a divorce or whatever it is. But you may want to share the license plate of the vehicle, or the description of a homeless person, or vandalism, or whatever it is. So there's different ways we can layer it and so on. So I just want to leave it open. Does anybody have any specific questions? Does anybody have something that I missed or something they want me to show? This is active right now, and obviously I don't show anything that's private information on a webinar like this. But if you wanted to get this started, you could just reply back to one of my emails, or put your name in the chat here, and I can send you over the details for getting it going in your church or in your whatever it might be, if it's a school or a business. We have a couple hotels that work with this and whatever else. So it kind of fits a lot of different things. There's even a neighborhood watch program that you can put in here. You can track your neighbors, and they can notify you when they're going on vacation, and says, hey, there could be a white car in my driveway because they're walking the dogs or something like that. So there's a lot of neat functionality in this thing. So I don't see any questions. Nobody's raising a hand or typing anything in the chat. So there we go. I'd be interested in the software to share with my stakeholders for the church. Yeah, I mean, I can, Brett, I can send you over if you want to email me back. I can just send you over the link, and we can show you, what that looks like. There you go, and we can get that going for you, and something that, again, it's your typical, like there's no long-term commitments and all that kind of stuff. So like if you want to do it, you do it. If you don't, you just turn it off type of thing. So that's kind of how it works. It's a pretty easy thing, but it really comes in handy, and it helps with insurance issues if they might ask for past incidents. You can just click a button and print them all out, or download them into a Microsoft Excel format, and you've got all your incidents right there for insurance purposes. Or maybe I know a lot of folks apply for the DHS grants and things like that. So you've got all of your information at your fingertips, and unlimited users. So I mean, if you like, Michael's got like 70 people on his team, like he can have a login for 70 of them, and it doesn't cost any more or any less. So it's one of those things. So Brett, I'll get that over to you for sure. In the meantime, you guys have a great night.
Hey folks, Michael Mann from Michael Mann Security Services. Thank you so much for watching our content. Hey, if you want to get a hold of us, you've got questions, here's how you can do that. You can give me a call at 615-956-3912. You can always get us at Safe with Man, and we're going to answer that as quick as possible. Okay. Or, folks, we have a free YouTube channel. There's a library of videos on physical protection, providing emergency response, security assessments, you name it. We've got a year's worth of video and training on our YouTube channel, and it is absolutely free. And that's at Safe with Man. You can get us at michaelmannsecurityservices.com. That's the website address. Shoot us a message. You can also get us at contact@michaelmannsecurityservices.com, or you can get us at scott@michaelmannsecurityservices.com, and we will email you back as quick as possible. And remember, it is about prevention, not response.